the Devy Devotional Podcast, a show devoted to college prospect evaluation with a fantasy football focus. With your hosts, John Arrington, Aaron Wilcox, and Andy Starr. This podcast brings you actionable strategies and player-driven analysis for your Devy, C2C, and Dynasty leagues. Let's dive in.
Let's dive into the underrated players. Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, John Arrington, and tonight, you guessed it, we talked about the overrated players last week. We're going to talk about the underrated players this week. And like I said last time, it's not as much fun to talk about the underrated players because maybe there's not as much contention and everything. When you start talking about people's favorite players, they love to get mad at you about it. So maybe it's more fun to talk about the overrated players. But speaking of fun, I'm going to bring on your favorite co-host, Aaron Wilcox. How are you doing tonight, buddy?
Ooh, John is playing favorites here. That's fun. Well, speaking of, our friend Andy Starr, who is typically with us, cannot make it tonight. So we're holding down the fort here. And no, I'm excited. I mean, it's always fun to talk about underrated guys. And hopefully we can even have a separate pod this offseason, just deep sleepers. But these are just names that we'll try to, again, stick on this podcast episode to guys maybe we haven't talked about a ton, but are still very relevant guys in both Devy landscapes, C2C landscapes, and for NFL prospect purposes. So no, I'm super excited.
Me too. We got a super fan in the chat. It's Cole. It might be someone that we know here, Cole Arrington, my son, checking us out. So we appreciate you, buddy. He says W stream. We will see if we can keep up with those kind words. But yeah, we have a lot to talk about tonight with the underrated players. Like I said, it's not as much fun, but man, is it important. We have to find these underrated players and find a way to get them onto our teams. In fact, there's a player tonight that Aaron and I have been discussing possibly making a trade for because I have him underrated and Aaron seems to have him I think he's underrated, and I think he's underrated by Aaron is how I should probably say it. And so we'll have to wait and see, what his response is. But we've been talking about a possible trade with this player, and we don't have to get into him just yet. But I think it is important to make these trades. I have a Devy draft starting tomorrow morning, and unfortunately, I'm sure it's the norm with most Devy leagues and most C2C leagues. There's just not that much trading involved, and even it's kind of crazy. But I have one guy every year. I'm not going to call him out or anything. He's actually great, and he always pays. Like, I'm not complaining about him at all. But he literally will not. He refuses to do the Devy draft. I don't know why. He's been in our Devy league for 3 years now. He always pays. He always does everything. Like, he does the rookie draft. He does everything, obviously Devy depleted, but he will not do the Devy draft, and he refuses. And I say, well, you can trade your picks. Like, even if you don't want to make these picks, you could still trade them. They have value. Nope. Don't want to do that. I just want to forfeit my picks every year. Okay. And so every year I remind him, hey, we're starting tomorrow. And he goes, nope. I won't be there, and I don't understand. But he's a great guy. He competes. He sets his lineup every week, and I mean I cannot complain about him. But point of the story is there's just not nearly enough trading in Devy and C2C and all that kind of stuff, and I think we need to start figuring out these overrated and underrated players so that we can start attacking those and making those kind of trades. And I know it's difficult. We're sitting there going back to that draft tomorrow. We had to drop our players beforehand, and people are like, "Oh, this is tough. How do I make these drops?" And it's like, you start getting to these players that you thought were going to be great 2 years ago, and next thing you know, you're sitting there looking at a Gideon Davidson like, do I need him on my team? I don't know. It's kind of tough, and so you start making those kind of choices, and it's like, yeah, maybe you start doing some 2-for-1s and trading to, someone else and getting some of these underrated players. And so you don't have to make those kind of decisions and things like that.
Yeah, definitely has a just a different element to it strategy wise. Like you said, you can only hold so many guys, and they're not getting you any college scoring. So, I mean, it is a fun format, just obviously different than the C to C format that we are sometimes used to talking about as well. And speaking of, Andy will have to talk a little bit more about his squad. We are just about finished with our 20 round supplemental Campus Academy draft that we I don't know when we started that, like a week and a half ago or something like that. But finally wrapping up here. Andy is on the clock. He's not live podcasting with us here, but maybe I'll make some updates if he does make his pick tonight. So we're excited to kind of break down some of the players there, some of the strategies. And Andy actually, he made a selection. I'll announce it on air. I don't know this player, Kevin Roberts, Houston wide receiver. I do not know him. I have a feeling he's a transfer, like a maybe a FCS or something like that. Um, no, in fact, Andy's strategy is one of the most bold I have ever seen in a Campus to Canton um, supplemental draft. Probably the most bold, actually, with the amount of just transfer guys. Like I think all but like three, four guys on his roster. Everybody else is transfers.
Wow.
Like, yeah, at
Well,
some
we've
point.
seen it before with him when we did our Devy U draft. He went all in, and what did he do? He won both sides, right? Like he went all in on just winning then, and he did. So we can't really complain. So he does seem to go to these extremes. But then he's probably a little more willing to, I guess he's betting on himself. Like he's saying, hey, like I can do well enough to where I can go crazy with all these transfers and everything, and then I can still rebuild this team quickly and not be like, in the basement like a Todd or somebody like that for for the last like 5 years. So I but yeah, we do. Obviously, we miss Andy. He was a little under the weather and he just wasn't feeling it. But I'm glad he's still making his picks, doing his job there. In the C2C drafts, that's the important thing. We also have Drake here, and he also says W stream. So we're we're getting all the dubs tonight. We appreciate it, but we'll see if we can continue the dubs here as we dive into these underrated players. Aaron, I know you said you had some lists. In fact, you said you had quite a few running backs, which I did not have as many of. Do you want us to start us with a running back, or you want to start with somebody else?
Completely up to you. If you want me to go ahead, I am ready.
Let's
All
do it.
right. All right. So I will go with actually the second running back that I have listed because I think this might be the most bold in a way, or at least the most that I differ from consensus, at least with these top ranked guys. So this running back is RB9 in Devy ADP, and I have him at RB3 in all of college football for Devy purposes, and that is Caleb Hawkins, who is transferring in to Oklahoma State with his head coach, with his quarterback. That system carrying over from North Texas going to Oklahoma State, and I just think he was so effective as a freshman, both in the receiving game, rushing game. He's explosive. He has enough size. I don't see a huge drop off coming for him. I understand the step up in competition and how is that offensive line gonna perform. I think his efficiency could take a hit, but he has some room to I guess negatively regress there. Like he could certainly, even if he's slightly less efficient, but moving up level of competition, I still don't think that's going to significantly hurt his stock. He's just such a talented, fun player, and he checks off so many boxes. I understand he was at the G5 level last year, but as a true freshman doing those types of things, what he did was spectacular. And in some ways, like Ashton Gianti, like we can go down the list. There are G5 guys who make a name for themselves and can actually project and perform well at the NFL level. They just have to be super, super good. And he was that good as a freshman. I'm excited to see what's ahead. And with the running back landscape right now kind of being a little bit ambiguous or underwhelming in some ways, I think he has high end talent to translate over there. Again, some consistency with the system coming into Oklahoma State for Hawkins.
Well, I think that consistency helps a lot because it kind of squashes any fears you have of what happens with the step up and things like that. We also got it really excited about a lower level freshman last year or 2 years ago in Fluff Bothwell. And then, he stepped up to the SEC and wasn't quite the same. Not to say he was terrible, but he wasn't quite the same. Now, at least here, you're stepping up from from the American to the Big 12. That's not nearly as much of a step, so it's not as bad. I'm right there with you. I think he's highly underrated. I've seen him as low. I've seen him out of people's top 12 Devy running backs. I've heard people talking about him on podcasts saying, oh, he's going to be an amazing CFF producer, but I just don't see the Devy side, and I don't get it. Like when you're that good as a true freshman, he has the size, he has the speed and athleticism that we're looking for. 8.7% big time run rate at a lower level is good. It's not amazing. So like that's the only thing that I'd be slightly concerned about is if that comes down a little bit and we're sitting there closer to like 6% or something like that, then that's going to be a little scary for him. Like maybe the athleticism wouldn't be there if that was the case. But it's really hard to say, and like once again, all the numbers we're looking at, we're looking at his, we're looking at his, and it says he's 6'2", 200 pounds. So, I mean, if he's actually 6'2", which, we have no idea, maybe he's 6'1", whatever. But, I mean, if he's actually 6'2", you would assume he has some frame to work with, to grow with and become, maybe not huge. We don't want him to hit 240 or something like that. We actually saw another guy at Oklahoma State kind of do something similar, and I'm forgetting his damn name now, but
Ollie Gordon, right? But
Ollie Gordon, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and he gained 20 pounds in an off season, and then he lost all of his athleticism and everything. That would be what we do not want to see. But at least being 6'2", you kind of have the frame to where you can still kind of make it work. It's different than being like 5'11" and 230 or whatever, like a Jaden Baugh, So I don't want to see that. But I'd be okay if he was 6'2", 220. I think we'd be okay with that. We just don't want to see 30 or 40 pounds gained or anything. But the nice thing that we see, and yes, it was at a lower level in the American, but 32 receptions for 370 yards, 11.6 yards per reception. That's what we like to see. That's an actual receiving back. This is someone who's not just dinking. Even if they are just dinking and dunking to him, he's doing something after the fact with the ball, and and he's actually doing more with it than just we see. Like I'm going to go back to Emmett Johnson until we get a reason not to. Going back to Emmett Johnson, like people are freaking out. He had 72 receptions or whatever he had. It's like, yeah, for 300 yards. Like, why are we excited about this? But 32 receptions for 370 yards, I can get behind that one. So I like it. I am a little hesitant, just because, like I said, that the big time run rate is good, but not amazing. So I'm slightly hesitant, but you can't get him out of my top 10 at the very least. And honestly, he's in my top 5 right now. So
nice. Yeah, and in fact, on the Oklahoma State website, he's listed at 6 foot. So 6 foot, 200 pounds. Okay, much better compact frame, much closer to where we want him to be. And I don't really see him, putting on, like you said, something crazy weight wise. Yes, bulking up should happen because he's a freshman, right? He was a little bit lanky last year. I still think he's probably just over 6 foot, to be honest, somewhere in between, maybe 6'1", but that's like Jeremiah Love type of height. So it's not like you can't succeed being 6'1" at the running back position. And like you said, pretty good efficiency marks. As a true freshman, I don't think that we need to be too caught up in, well, this rate wasn't perfect, because he has room to grow. He has room to continue to advance within athleticism, physicality, etc. So, yep, very bright future there for Hawkins. I'm curious who you have next as an underrated Devy asset.
I was trying to decide if I wanted to stick with the running backs or not. I was telling you before, all right, I have one running back that I'm going to start. I'm going to start just like I did last week. I'm going to ease this in. I'm going to ease this in with Keywan Brown. And I get it that he's not a player that people are going to be overly excited about because of who is there at his school. But there's a lot of competition. In fact, they brought in more competition for him this offseason. It's already tough enough when you have a player like Isaac Brown ahead of you. We thought that Isaac Brown was going to leave, and he did not. So that wasn't great for that. But then they actually brought in another player that I like as well. And am I crazy? Is it also Marquise Brown? Is it three Browns?
Yeah. Wasn't he the Missouri guy?
Yeah. It just hit me that they're all three Browns here, and I was like, wait,
Well, so was
that's really weird.
Davis. Marquise Davis? Or
Marquise Davis. That's why it didn't
Oh,
sound
okay.
right at first. I'm like, there's no way they're all last name with Brown. That'd be a little weird. They got to type, but thank you, Marquise Davis. Yeah, and I actually like him as a prospect and everything. I think it's gonna be a waiting game because obviously we love Isaac Brown, and then Keywan Brown doesn't get enough love, but. You want to talk about the big time run rate, 11.7% over his college career, and the receiving game isn't quite there, but the PPR points per touch is what I love to see out of a player like that. And we get really excited about Isaac Brown, but we have to remember he's 188 pounds. Like he's meant to be explosive. He's meant to be this this lightning bolt and all that kind of stuff. But then you have a much larger player in Keywan Brown, but he's still hitting 7.3 yards per carry. He's still hitting 9.8 yards per reception. And like I said, 11, almost 12% big time run rate. So you're still seeing the efficiency there with that player. And I feel like it's going to be one of those players almost like a Jadarian Price or a Jonathan Brooks or somebody to that effect, where it's like they don't get the love that they deserve because you have a Jeremiah Love ahead of you, you have a Bijan Robinson ahead of you, but then all of a sudden, whether they go to the NFL at the same time or whether they take turns or whatever, all of a sudden everyone goes, "Oh wait, that Keywan Brown guy is actually really good too." So I think he is underrated just because of his situation, which makes sense. But there's no reason to hate on a player that was able to get 704 rushing yards on only 96 rushing attempts last year. Imagine what he could do with 200 or more rushing attempts on a team. Like, unbelievable. And obviously, we don't want anything to happen to Isaac Brown. We love him. And I like Marquise Davis, the guy that could be there in a year or two. But yeah, give me Keywan Brown. I have him as a top 15 running back in Devy, and I definitely do not see that in the rankings or anything like that. He's kind of a forgotten man for most people.
Yeah, I like the Keywan Brown shout out there. I mean, he is a guy that I'm a little bit torn on. I definitely like him as a player. I, in fact, drafted him in an early offseason supplemental here. This was a couple months ago, and I had actually, I don't even know if I drafted. Let's see. I actually got sniped on him, so I had to trade a bunch to basically acquire him because he was on my board. I'm like, I gotta grab this guy, and I waited too long, and Andy sniped him from me in our recent supplemental. So it's like definitely there's a lot of intrigue there with Keywan Brown on the Devy Devotional podcast. And I guess my biggest hesitation with him is, like you said, it's Isaac Brown, who is the more explosive guy, the guy that probably is going to get all the attention there. If he's healthy, well, then Keywan, he is a little bit more of that like backseat, right, second fiddle, and that's what he's been thus far in his career. Like, he did have a breakout this last year, but pretty unproven. And you're also doing this at the ACC level, right? We're not talking about, like you said, Jadarian Price, like on Notre Dame, a bigger time program even, or looking at like Jonathan Brooks or otherwise like in the SEC, Texas, doing these types of things efficiency-wise. It is at the ACC level. So I guess we have to, maybe take that into consideration a bit, but it is kind of criminal. Like, he's not even being ranked in the C2C Devy ADP that I'm seeing out there. So he is being drafted, fairly well in campus to Canton leagues, but that's a different pool, right? Different strategy and everything. So I have him as like a top 30-ish or top 35 back in the Devy landscape at this time. So I do like him. Maybe that's still too low, but I would agree with you that Brown seems to be a bit underrated.
Yeah, I was trying to look at DLF's rankings really quick, but I was getting an error code on their site. Hopefully, it'll be back up here in a little bit. But I looked at Campus to Canton. I finally found him at RB 53 overall in their Devy ranks. So yeah, I do think, honestly, I thought he was even higher than that. I mean, when you're talking about, like I mentioned Fluff Bothwell He's behind Fluff. In these ranks, he's behind Mackay Hughes in Devy ranks. Like, come on, yeah. Okay, I thought this was even a cooler take than it is. Now I'm like, now I'm pissed. Like, we got to get Kewan Brown a lot higher, guys. How about that? A lot higher. All
Yeah,
right,
that's fair.
now I'm spicy. Now I'm ready to go. Before I was thinking we were starting slow, but we're definitely not anymore.
No, I like it. I like it. We probably should get into our little debate here on this wide receiver that you teased earlier.
Ooh. All right, I like it. While we're spicy, why don't we just stick with KJ Duff? Because what is it about a 6'6" wide receiver? Oh wait, John, he's 6'6". He can't be good. He's 1 inch too tall. What is it about a 6'6" wide receiver with a 17.3 yards per reception and a 25% receive I'm sorry 34% receiving market share in his sophomore season, a 25% market share over his 2 years in college football? What about that guy makes you go, yeah, I'm gonna rank him at wide receiver 30? Because I not only do not have him at wide receiver 30, I do not have him, or I have him in my top five of Devy wide receivers. Like I said, there's just, I get that people are concerned, like they're, when you're that tall, do you have to transition to tight end or whatever? Like, I'm not going to freak out. And I've even seen posts that have said, he's listed as 6'6", but he's probably going to be 6'5" when it's all said and done. And I'm like, are we really? What's going to happen? All of a sudden, he's 6'5" at the combine, and everyone's going to be like, I love him. He's the best player I've ever seen. So I know you're usually not like a crazy sizist or anything like that. I mean, obviously, we see extremes. If a guy's 6'9" or whatever, he's probably not going to be the best wide receiver out there. But it doesn't seem like Duff is that normal, guy who's not running any routes or doing anything. Like, yes, his ADOT is higher, so he's probably getting more, big plays, which obviously you would see with just a guy who could run straight, be tall and fast and whatever. But you don't generally get 1,100 yards receiving from those kind of players unless like you're just playing against garbage. Well, I don't think that they're playing against garbage. They're in the Big Ten, so I think that I think that 1,100 yards receiving, that kind of ADOT, that kind of yards per team pass attempt as a true sophomore, yeah, I'm calling him underrated.
Yeah, and I do get it. I will say that I am higher on KJ Duff than probably consensus out there. I mean, I have him at what, wide receiver 24 in Devy, and the ADP out there as 32. So, not necessarily disagreeing that he is a bit underrated, but for the ultimate upside to take him as like a top 5 type of player or in Devy, or top 10, that just gets a little bit bold for me, and I'll explain why. I do think that KJ Duff, what he has done from a production standpoint has been impressive, no doubt, right? We look at the production as a freshman, then as a sophomore, and then doing it alongside of Ian Strong, and then also doing that at Rutgers. Like, that's, pretty impressive, just that resume. I will read, because I wrote him up for the 2026 Devy guide. So check that out at campusdecan.com, by the way. Some great writers on our team, basically broke down most of the relevant guys in the Devy space and wrote up profiles. I wrote up the profile for KJ Duff. So I've actually watched a lot of KJ Duff and, taken definitely a look into the production plus the film aspects of his profile. And this is what I wrote for his kind of how he plays, how he wins, strengths, weaknesses. One of the most obvious observations when watching KJ Duff is his immense size. As you may expect, he is an excellent red zone threat. Surprisingly, he also has great ability to break off routes, especially for his size. It is truly impressive to see his smooth movements despite his large frame. KJ Duff shows impressive hands, dominating contested catch situations and adjusting well to the ball in the air. While he is a strong, determined wide receiver, he is not exceptionally quick after the catch, limited by his size. He is also not very elusive, as reflected in his low missed tackles forced numbers. Duff's breakaway speed is average, so his lack of dynamic ability with the ball in his hands is likely one of his biggest downfalls. Despite this, he owns quietly excellent early career production thus far. And so I went on to, highlight some of the, positives with him. And I think at the end of the day, if he is like 6'7", like that would explain a lot. I don't know if he is. There's been kind of rumors like, is he 6'6"? Is he taller or maybe shorter? Like you said, I guess we don't know for sure. I would say he probably does measure in at 6'6" when it's all said and done. But we'll just have to see where that falls. He's going to be kind of a unicorn ultimately at the position if he hits. But he is just such a fun player, going up and making these crazy grabs, and he can actually break off routes really well. He's a good route runner. He's just not explosive with the ball in his hands. He does most of the work, winning downfield, or he's broken a couple of plays, but they're more wide open. It's not like he was out running everybody on the field. So I guess that's my biggest concern, is that athleticism there for him to really translate big time at the next level.
Yeah, and I see that in the numbers. Like when the ADOT is really close to the yards per reception, you do have to question some of the like after the catch, things, and I don't get crazy into yak and things in Beth, but I always say, like, you're able to see it in the other numbers, in the basic numbers, and so you see that when you have a guy that has you have a guy like Zachariah Branch who has a 3 ADOT, and then he has like a 9 yards per reception, you go, okay, well, that's not anything amazing. Like, that's not really blowing my mind. Then you see a guy like Jordan Tyson, and he has like a 11 ADOT, 11.5 ADOT, and he has 16.4 yards per reception. You go, okay, that guy's doing something after the catch, like that kind of thing. We don't necessarily see that with KJ Duff, but like all of what I do look for is, can you score PPR points? Can you score fantasy points? Because that's what I'm looking for. A good fantasy receiver in college typically turns into a good fantasy receiver in the NFL as well. And so that's why I look at PPR points per touch, because you see guys like Jeremiah Smith, 3.46, Cam Coleman, 3.35, Ryan Coleman Williams, 3.27, KJ Duff, a little bit lower, but 3.15. He's still up in that same exact range that we're looking for. TJ Moore, another bigger guy that maybe people are saying, does he have enough athleticism and things, a little bit lower, 3.04. So we start getting even lower and lower and lower. But the point is that that Duff was able to score these points at Rutgers, and Callie Akmanis, the QB, the Greek rifle, if you will, he has an arm, and he pushes the ball down the field, but he's not the most accurate guy. I mean, I want to say he's completed 62% of his passes and things. So you're still having to sit there and go, are you getting the ball to your players? Are you doing that? And that's why we give a little bit of love to Ian Strong. We say he could be better with a better passer. What could KJ Duff be with a better passer than Callie Akmanis even? Callie Akmanis is fun for college, but I don't know that he's, great or anything that I would say, oh yeah, I have to have this guy on my team. So I think, I'm probably too high, and I feel like I've always been too high on Duff since like I basically found out about him. But I've actually like manually, I told you, like every once in a while I'll manually discount a player in Beth just because everyone seems to be that much lower on him. And so I went in and actually manually discounted KJ Duff, and it dropped him 1 spot. So like, what more do I do? Because I've kind of set rules for myself over the years where I don't drop them too much. Like I'm willing to do a little bit of a manual drop, but then after that, I was like, what more can I do? So, but there's got to be something in between. I have them in the top 5. You have them in the top 25. There's got to be somewhere in the middle there where we can meet and get this trade done. In what was it, the Campus to Canton League? Is that what it was?
The Devy U League. So
it was Devy U. Okay.
Yeah, so I think we'll be able to do it. It's just a matter of we won't get into all the ins and outs of the strategy that we're going to use here, but probably some supplemental picks, right, to make it work, and we'll see. I love moving around in supplemental drafts, as you know.
Well, I mean, like I said, we not enough trades get done in C2C and Devy drafts, so we will make a point to make this KJ Duff trade happen. And it's one of those things where we clearly know each other's rankings. We know how we feel about these players, and so there's no playing around. It's just at that point you just have to find what works for both sides. And we got Brett in the chat. He says, "Hey guys," and Frank is also here. What's up, Frank? We appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully you're enjoying the show. In fact, Aaron, I think you're up with another one. Although I have another one. You know what? No, all right, I'm going to take it over here. I'm going to host here. I have another player that's almost exactly the same argument as KJ Duff. And so I might as well just get into Deuce Robinson. And I feel like you agree with me even more on this one than KJ Duff, although I see so many similarities between these two players. And it's the only thing you can really say is that we've seen the massive year now from Deuce Robinson. And so I feel like everyone kind of had to get on board where, yes, 1,000-yard season from KJ Duff is nothing to sneeze at, but it's not quite that eye-catching. You're the only guy on the field. There's nothing else to watch at FSU kind of thing like Deuce Robinson was. I think all of last year we just kept saying, okay, well, FSU's playing these easy teams in the beginning of the year, and then Deuce is going to fall off after that. And I was just riding it all year long, going like, this is amazing, because it never stopped. And they'd be like, they go up against, they go up against one of the best. Hopefully I didn't lose you guys for it. It popped up for a second, but it'd go up against one of the best teams in college football, and he'd still have 100 and something yards, and he'd still put up however much, and they'd lose by like 30 points, and it didn't matter. He would still just dominate. And, I just said KJ Duff, 34% market share in his best season. Deuce Robinson, 36% market share in his best season. The PPR points per touch numbers are similar. Everything's great. And I feel like Deuce has been a guy who has been undervalued his entire time. When he was at USC, oh, he's just a tight end, and he's playing baseball, and he's never going to become anything. Meanwhile, he's outproducing Zachariah Branch. He's outproducing Mekhi Lemon on the same exact team. Then he goes to FSU and he just dominates. And honestly, I feel like he should have come out this year. I don't really understand why he didn't. I get ACC teams, especially FSU this year, did not get any kind of love. And so, maybe that's why. But yeah, I think this is the year that Deuce Robinson puts himself on the map and really takes a step forward. And I mean, like I said, I could probably make very similar arguments for Deuce and KJ Duff. And so that's why I wanted to kind of throw them in together here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm there with you 100%. Top 10 Devy wide receiver right now with Deuce Robinson. And I think the difference is just the big time playmaking ability, even running after the catch. Those types of things. I just see more explosiveness there with Deuce Robinson. And it makes sense. I mean, the guy was a 5-star prospect coming out. Now, there was questions. Was he going to be a tight end? Was he going to be a wide receiver? So that 5-star status was awarded to him as more of a tight end recruit coming out because they just didn't know. But he's just so dominant as a receiving option. They're like, well, if he can bulk up, sure, he can play tight end. But if he just stays kind of lean and explosive like he has been throughout his career, then great, he could be a receiving option. So he displays a lot of the things that KJ Duff does. I just think that a few of the run after the catch aspects of his profile are stronger, and that's the big difference for me in their profiles. But yeah, Deuce Robinson going into his 4th year, KJ Duff going into his 3rd year. I guess that you could say is an advantage for Duff for sure. But I like what Florida State. Well, I mean, I guess I shouldn't say I like what they're going to do this year because there's unknown at the quarterback position. So that is a risk. That is risk. But at the end of the day, I mean, Robinson, he went over 1,000 receiving yards this last year. He was very solid earlier in his career when he was getting opportunities there, when he earned some targets at USC. So, no, I think he's a strong player at the end of the day. I don't really have any disagreements by any means.
Yeah, and I was talking about the PPR points per touch with all these guys: Jeremiah Smith at 3.46, KJ Duff at 3.15, Deuce Robinson at 3.84. So by far the highest PPR points per touch. That shows that big playability, that even after the catchability and everything that you're talking about. And you definitely you hit it right on the nail. Deuce Robinson is a more complete package as of today, but he's also a senior. He should be over KJ Duff. So I'm kind of giving the benefit of the doubt. And I said that Deuce Robinson had a bigger year, and it felt like that, but they actually ended up with very similar yardage. But the difference being that Deuce Robinson's quarterback was completing passes at a 57% clip, and Callie McManus over at Rutgers was completing a 62% clip, and I think there was about a 500 yard difference there as far as the passing as well. So it was just a little more extreme for Deuce there, and like he had a little bit higher market share, a little bit higher, this and that, PPR points per touch and everything. It gets me really excited about him. I'm starting to see people kind of catching on and everything, but I just feel like he's just constantly underrated. Did you mention where you have him? Because honestly, I have him right behind Duff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I have him top 8. I think I have him at 8, I want to say, in my wide receiver ranking. So higher than Duff, and probably similar to you, it sounds like, or just lower, but
Yeah.
not, yeah, not
Definitely
too far off.
in the same tier there, I would assume. So
Yeah.
two wide receivers, kind of similar, big guys that like to catch the ball and run. But who do you got for us, Aaron? I kind of cheated and did two there in a row.
Yeah, no, no, all good. I guess I will say as well, I did my guy, Deuce Robinson, if I remember correctly, as my second my guy in this year's Devy guide. So it was just out of principle. It's not even that I'm like a truther, but obviously I am, I guess, higher than consensus ranks on him. So yeah, I just felt he was too low. That was going to be a mistake having him as low as we did. So that's why I said take the reins here. I'll just fall on the sword or whatever you want to say for Deuce Robinson, and let's move him up that tier. So, anyways, I will go with a different position here. We've been talking a little bit about quarterbacks for these wide receivers or even these running backs, but let's just talk about a quarterback himself as being underrated in the Devy landscape, and that's Bear Bachmeier, in my opinion. I do think that, 104 is his overall Devy rank. I don't know where that falls amongst quarterbacks, if that's like in the quarterback teens or 20s or whatever. But I do think that Bear Bachmeier is a bit underrated at this time. And I get it. I mean, the guy wasn't a 5-star recruit. He's not 6'6", 220 plus pounds, but he is a very solidly built player. At the end of the day, what he did is a true freshman stepping in there to BYU, not some sort of powerhouse by any means, from like a receiving standpoint and otherwise as a school. He was efficient enough. He threw for over 3,000 yards. His completion percentage was fine. It's where we needed to be. He just threw a few too many interceptions. That's probably the biggest critique of him at this point, like 7 interceptions. Not great, but he was a true freshman. I think that will improve. He's just got a great feel for the game. Like, you watch him play and he's able to rush for first downs when he needs it, when the team really needs him to step up. He steps up and he turns on that rushing production. He had 11 rushing touchdowns last year, well over 500 yards rushing. That is impressive for sure for a dual threat type of guy. And I think he does just enough as a passer where I'm pretty high on him. Or at least I'm very optimistic. Like, I don't even think I have him that crazy in my quarterback ranks. I'm trying to look here. Like, I barely have him like just around top 20-ish mark or so. Like, it's not as though I have him as a top 10 guy even. I just feel like we just need more people talking about him. So I have to mention him, just as he's never talked about in these kind of promising young quarterback conversations that are had.
Well, I have to agree with you that he's underrated, but at the same time say I do not care about Bear Bachmeier. I feel like he's gonna be more of a fun like college quarterback than anything else. I don't see it in the numbers, and I think he's a little undersized. Did you say that? I maybe not, he's not huge, whatever it is. But it's just the numbers are just underwhelming. It's not nothing. Nothing looks good. The 2.83% big time throw rate, the 8.5 intended air yards. The nice thing is the legs, the rushing touchdowns and things like that, the yards per carry. I mean, I won't even give him too much crap about the interceptions. 1.8%. I mean, that's high, but it's not insane. I mean, that's like Jackson Dart level. So I'm not even going to freak out about 1.8%. You start getting above 2, then we start, maybe freaking out at that point. The adjusted yards per attempt are pretty damn low. That being said, you're saying you're saying you have them in like your 20s. I have them at QB 13. I don't, but I mean, that sounds crazy, but I also think there's probably five QBs that I would even consider draftable right now, like for NFL purposes. And that's why I'm talking about for Devy purposes, for NFL purposes. There's maybe, all right, I'll get, I think we said what, 8 quarterbacks last week. When I think we were talking about, was it last week or the week prior, whenever we were talking about these QBs, and I said, all right, we'll stop at Dante Moore, and that's my 8th QB. I'll say, okay, that's the last one that I'll even say it has a possibility right now. Everyone else has to take a pretty massive step forward for me to even think that it's possible. And Bear Bachmeier's right there. The thing is, you have Bryce Underwood, who's actually my QB 14, one spot behind Bear Bachmeier, being drafted as the QB 1 overall for a lot of people, or at least a top 5 QB for a lot of people. But I mean, he had even worse numbers, even worse freshman year. So, when you're that young and you haven't done that much, I try to give you a little bit benefit of the doubt and say, hey, yeah, the numbers are not great, but dude's a second year player, like a true sophomore. He could easily take a step forward. I don't really believe that he's ever going to be a thing, but I mean, if you're talking about somebody talking about him in like QB 30 or worse, then I would say, yeah, like we have to have him higher than that.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. And I mean, I'm not saying that like his second season was anywhere near like Arch's necessarily, but Arch like in a more limited sample size there. I mean, but yeah, I shouldn't even compare him, right? Just different players, different situations, whatever the case is. And at the end of the day, there's not the name cachet, right? He goes to BYU. So Bear Bachmeier, being underrated, but at the same time, yeah, some issues with him maybe reaching that true ceiling. I think we can both agree on that. I'm going back to the size thing, 6'2", 220 pounds, so kind of a stocky guy, but certainly can make it work, right? That's not a bad frame by any means. I could see him having a career, like a Sam Howell or somebody like that in college and potentially getting some day 2 draft capital. So I was curious if you had quarterbacks, because I was struggling. I mean, I don't want to just throw out like high-end names that I will say, like, we've talked about quarterbacks before on this podcast. That's why I'm hesitant. I'm not going to throw out a Darian Mensah or a CJ Carr because we talk about them every week, and we know that we talk about how they're underrated. And I just don't want to hash that out again because it seems redundant, and there's maybe some other names out there. But I was actually struggling to come up with some other names.
Yeah, and it's kind of ugly out there right now. That's what I was saying. Like, I have Bachmeier as my QB 13, but that's not saying much. I feel like we're in a different world right now where there's a lot of fun college QBs, but there's not a lot of good NFL QBs. And that's just that's the world we're in. So, because if you're talking about C2C, you could go on for days about how many good QBs there are, and I can go Jaden Maeva and Mark Gronowski and Damon Williams and whoever else, but none of those guys are going to be NFL QBs. So I was hoping you were going to have somebody, because you were nice enough to give us Darian Mensah last year and say that he was going to be a top 5 guy, and I said you were insane. And now I have him as my QB, my QB2 in the class. So I guess I was the one that was insane.
Yeah, no, I mean, sometimes it's great when those things align, right? You can make a bold call like that. Like last year, it was like Jeremiah Love. Well, he was my guy even before last year, but that was my call. It was like, yeah, he's a tier 1 guy, RB1 kind of thing. Obviously, that came to fruition, but I don't really have a quarterback where I feel that strongly about them rising up this year. At least that is underrated, right? There's guys that I like, I mean, that I think could take that next step, but either we've already talked about them with CJ Carr, Darian Mensah, or guys probably lower ceiling like a Bear Bachmeier. You mentioned Maeva as a guy who never will probably make it. I still think that there's like a sliver of a chance if things really align there with just a true breakout season, but they're losing so much receiving talent there at USC. Like, it's kind of unproven. I don't think things are going to quite align this year for him to really make that big step and try to challenge for day one draft capital, because it's already a pretty solid or interesting, at least, quarterback class coming up this next year. So, yeah, I mean, you could call out the freshmen like Diabell, Texas, Faison Brandon, Tennessee, as being a bit underrated too. Maybe not Diabell. I think I find him to be a little bit underrated just because he falls more into that like late first, maybe even early second in the occasional C2C supplemental draft. And I think that he, talent-wise, is definitely up there, or maybe even better than a Keyshawn Henderson when he's healthy. And Jared Curtis, I mean, I like Jared Curtis's arm talent just as much as anybody, but at Vanderbilt, like these freshmen, Keyshawn Henderson at Houston, Jared Curtis at Vanderbilt going as top 5 guys in supplemental drafts, it's kind of bold, right? Versus I would rather say that a Faison Brandon, a Diabell is a little bit more underrated in comparison, who could definitely be the QB1 in this 2029 class.
Yeah, I really want to give you a QB, and I'm really torn because I do not believe in this QB at all. But he's one spot ahead of Bear Bachmeier in my ranks. So if you're calling Bear underrated, do I have to call this other guy underrated? Because he's not. I'm looking at like I said, DLF's rankings were down for whatever reason. So I'm looking over at campus2canton.com's ranks, and this player is not. I'm just double checking here. I do not see him in the top 20. And yeah, there he is. He is QB 28 for C2C.com. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I do not truly believe in this player, but I want to give you one QB, and that's Mason Heinschel out of Pitt. He's kind of the same thing in what we were talking about with Bear, like a little bit better, but the numbers are not meeting that threshold. 4.10% big time throw rate, 8.6 intended air yards. Like, those numbers have to come up. But, just like Bear, he's a second-year player. Like, he can do it. And, it's not like we've seen in recent years a big-time player from Pitt be drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. It's not that unbelievable. Dude had 2,400 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, to 8 interceptions in year 1. What does he do in year 2, 3, and 4, or whatever? Like I said, I'm not overly excited. At QB 12, it's really more just like maybe, he has the ability to take that Fernando Mendoza step up to where it's like, okay, right now he's at like a backup level QB, and then now he could be a low level starter or something like that. I could see that happening with Heinschel. I could see that possibly happening with Bear Bachmeier. So I'm not overly excited about these players, but if they take a step forward, especially in year 2 or year 3, where we generally see that big step, then all of a sudden now he's throwing for 3,500 yards, 30 touchdowns, and like 60% completion rate. We go, okay, maybe you can at least be drafted as like a second round pick or whatever. So I'm not like out here just saying like you gotta go get him, but at the same time, I guess if I had to throw out an underrated player there, it would be Mason Heinschel out of Pitt.
Okay, yeah, no, I get that for sure, and he could take a step forward, just like we expect these other guys like Bear Bachmeier or Kamario Taylor. I don't think Kamario Taylor's underrated. Like, he's ranked pretty highly amongst a lot of people, or he's going pretty high in drafts. People expect that next step, but at the end of the day, Kamario Taylor, again, I don't think he's underrated. I think he could take that next step as a young player. Could see it for Heinschel as well. I just the rushing upside is not there like it was with a Bear Bachmeier, so that's my biggest issue, right? 88 yards is what I'm seeing on the Sports Reference production for him in that freshman season. So that's just not going to quite cut it for some of the passing shortcomings that we saw. But hey, I don't like it, I don't mind that as a guy who could step up. Like you said, if you had to give us like a deeper name or a name that's under the radar, I'm going to go with another running back here. And this guy, I mean, he has his truthers out there. That's for sure. People who have been on him from the start. But that's Aeneas Williams. Aeneas Williams out of Notre Dame. And so maybe I sniped John there. I don't know. I know John kind of likes. I feel like there's plenty of people out there who kind of like him. But I have him at RB15 in Devy, and he's going at running back 29. So I mean, almost twice as high as what ADP is, I guess. At the end of the day, I think Aeneas takes that big step forward this year, really takes over that Notre Dame backfield. There's not much else for proven talent there. They will play the freshmen a little bit, but I mean, I don't think they're going to give them a huge role. I don't think Nolan James is, I mean, he's good enough to get some carries, but I don't think he's going to take over. I really do think it's Aeneas Williams, unless health is an issue, which it sounds like he's trending towards being healthy for the season. Nia said he's shown enough, some breakaway plays, some receiving ability, definitely some solid rushing efficiency when he's had the opportunity. He's just been blocked by 2 first-round running backs, which now have been vacated right from Notre Dame. So Aeneas Williams, next guy up there at a very, very great program for developing running backs in recent years.
Yeah, I like that call. I mean, I considered him. I feel like we've talked about him a little bit. So I mean, I'm not to say that we've gone crazy about him or anything like that, but we've talked about him a little bit recently. So I wasn't going to bring him up, but I like the call. I think you said you had him at 18. I have him at RB22. But honestly, this is going to sound crazy, but we've talked about how we're not Keywan Lacey fans. I've talked about how I'm definitely not a Keywan Lacey fan. I have him 2 spots behind Keywan Lacey, and I really want to put him ahead, and just to say that I did it. And so I think I'm going to, because they're essentially in the same tier, and I'm willing to move around in tiers and stuff like that. So I'm going to do it just to say it. So Aeneas Williams is my RB20. And so now we're sitting pretty top 20 for Aeneas Williams. I feel like I'm doing good with that as well. And you said he was going like RB28 or something. So I definitely think that Aaron can decide if he wants to say that publicly or not. But he has some news as well for us. But yeah, I think I'm doing it. Aeneas Williams, top 20 RB, ahead of Keywan Lacey.
Yep, no, I'm there with you. He's ahead of Keywan Lacey for me. He's RB15, Aeneas is, and I'm a little bit lower on Lacey in comparison. But yeah, I guess that's underrated guy. Do you have another one for us, John?
Yeah, and I think the big thing about Aeneas is he going to get the full workload? And that's what we're really waiting for. 72 rushing attempts or total attempts is actually bringing him down quite a bit in Devy Beth. As soon as he hits 100, he's going to hit a threshold. He'll move up a little bit. As soon as he hits 150, so on and so forth. Once he starts getting that workload, he'll actually move up pretty quickly. Because actually, just to screw around with it, if I gave him 300 rushing attempts, he would move up to running back 13 in Devy Beth. But he only has 72 right now. So we're trying to pump the brakes a little bit and say like, hey, we got to see a little bit more before we get too crazy with it. But that being said, like what he's done so far has actually been really nice. 12.3% big time run rate. That is what we love to see. But enough about that. I'm going to switch it up. I'm going to go back to the wide receivers, but I've been talking about the skyscrapers, these tall guys. I'm going to go the complete opposite. I think Aaron knows where I'm going here. I'm going Mario Craver. The quintessentially underrated from day one. I get he's 5'9". I get he's small, but he was on pace for an amazing special season sophomore year last year, before he got injured. And if you don't think that, because he played the majority of the season and everything, so, I don't think he was hurt or he wasn't that hurt. It was just Casey Concepcion's. But go look at the tail of the season. Like, go look at the first half of the season and then look at the rest of it. There's no way you can tell me that he just forgot how to play football all of a sudden. Like, it's just physically impossible. So I have to believe that the injury, that they talk about is was holding him back. But yet, even with that, he still put up, let's see, what was it, 917 receiving yards with that injury. The big time, or I'm sorry, the PPR points per touch are right up there with the KJ Duffs and the Ryan Coleman Williams, like the players that we're talking about before, in that same realm. The A dot's right where you want to see it at 13.2, 16.9 yards per reception. But then that market share was even higher. But remember, he had a first round talent in Casey Concepcion, who did take a step forward as a player, become a better, more well rounded player in himself. And took that step forward, and that was great. But even with that, Mario Craver still had a 27% market share. With that level of teammate, he still almost had a 30% market share in that offense. Well, guess what? Casey Concepcion is not there anymore. But guess who's still there? Mario Craver, baby. He's healthy. He's ready to go. I get people are going to freak out about the size, but it honestly, he reminds me so much of Josh Downs, where it was like, yeah, it's a smaller player. You can, I mean, maybe even the injuries and stuff, which maybe isn't great because obviously Josh Downs has dealt with injuries in the NFL as well. But just a player that can actually take over a game and can play inside and out, even though he is a smaller guy that you would generally say is a slot only or whatever. We don't see that with Craver. We didn't see that with Downs. They were able to move inside and out and do all those things. Maybe a la Josh Downs, we won't necessarily see it in the NFL, but I just think that you have people saying like, "Oh, he's not even in my top 20 wide receivers." And like, how can you look at that season last year and then look at what he's going to do this year and say he's not a top 20 wide receiver at the very least? I'm putting him in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, it must just be a combination of size and play style that people are like, I'm just out on that archetype. But I do think that Mario Craver is good enough when it's all said and done that he can go pretty high in the NFL draft. That the size, I mean, he's not 5'8", right? What, he's like 5'9", maybe 5'10" when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's not the smallest guy ever. And he's just a very effective player. He's explosive when healthy, which really it's not like he's dealt with a bunch of injuries, just a little bit of bad luck as the season went on there, getting banged up. So, yeah, he did enough as a freshman at the SEC level, transferring over to Texas A&M. Very impressive second season. So, hey, keep it going, Mario Craver. We want to see it. He's the top 15 Devy wide receiver. I guess two guys that I should shout out at the wide receiver position: Desmond Roebuck, going at 38, wide receiver 38 in the Devy ADP. I think it's just too low, not quite enough respect for what was a very promising freshman season for an underrated guy who's a smooth mover, enough athleticism. He's not the dominant guy. He's not that X outside who's just going to be like mossing guys. He's no Cam Coleman, right? But Desmond Roebuck is a fun player. Definitely underrated. And I will also throw out another freshman there. I know we haven't talked a lot about freshmen. Like at the quarterback position, I probably should have thrown out a couple guys I like there. Jonas Williams, USC quarterback, I'm a big fan of. I think he could be future star. I even think that Tate Reynolds gets that job at some point here for Clemson this year. And just a ton of athletic upside with him. I could see him having a pretty interesting year, at least for fantasy purposes. But then the wide receiver position, Cedarian Morgan, CD Morgan at Alabama, early enrollee, probably going to be locked into some significant playing time there this season for Alabama. I have him at wide receiver 11 in Devy, and he's going at 21 or later in those Devy drafts. So wide receiver 21 or so. That's just too low. I get it. In supplementals, he's still pretty expensive, but the fact that he even falls into the second round in some supplemental drafts, to me, is kind of crazy. So I really, really do like him. And at one point here, I said I would move him into that wide receiver 1 spot in this freshman class. So I'm solidly in that tier 1 with Chris Henry, with Keys, ahead of Lott, ahead of those other guys. I'm just a big Cedarian Morgan fan and believer at Alabama.
I'm trying to bring up, because the only place that I actually combine my freshmen right now is on DLF. So I was trying to bring up my top 75 so I could see where exactly I have Cedarian. because I might need to move him up. Um,
And you
trying to
may, I
s-
mean, you're not usually a guy who's going to draft these freshmen super high unless,
no,
they're obvious stud or obvious, value maybe that's fallen to you.
I do have Sedarian Morgan ahead of Keywan Lacey, so that's a start. That's a good start there. We're just hating on Keywan here today. Um, yeah, I talked last week about how I'm lower on Decorian Moore than most people, and he was my one of my overrated players, if not the most overrated player for me. I have Sedarian Morgan right after Decorian Moore. So I
Yeah.
think, I
Nice.
mean, you can kind of look at it one of two ways. I have Decorian lower than most people, but then I probably have Sedarian, at least probably a little higher than most people as well.
Nice. I like that. So, I mean, getting to the hour point here, I mean, do you
Yes,
have
sir.
a last guy for us or anything like that? Or do we cover a lot of underrated guys?
Uh, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, I have a couple guys in, like there's a couple wide receivers here that I think, like Jace Brown. We've talked about him quite a bit, but I think hopefully going over to LSU that like things are going to be a little different now. He'll actually be on the national radar and not for all the wrong reasons, like it was before. They can use him, but I'm wondering like. I know a lot of people have talked about Amarian Miller, but I feel like people talk about him, but yet they don't ever rank him high. And the more I've looked at it and the more I've paid attention to Marion Miller, the more I've gotten excited about him. And then I know obviously we don't want to comp anything, we don't want to comp players or whatever. I do not think Amarian Miller is Jordan Tyson, but yet going over to the same school and everything, you get that helmet scouting going, and you go, I think he could be a quality player. Now, of course, he doesn't have he doesn't have the same exact team and everything around him, so I don't know how different things are going to be, but I guess Amari Miller is just somebody that I want to be like, hey, I don't necessarily love this player, but I'm probably higher than most.
Yeah, no, I like that shout out there. I am still pretty high on him, but I was kind of shocked to see him going at wide receiver 18 apparently in Devy. So like
Yeah.
you said, the rankers are kind of all over the place with him. I don't even know if I'm quite that aggressive with my ranking, but I do like him. If you remember last season, during the season, you were asking, Andy and I, like everybody come up with, a couple of just like later like sleepers for the draft class. I said Amarian Miller. He returned to school, but that still stands. Like I still think,
Yep.
I mean, he's not maybe a sleeper even right at this point, but he's still not getting, I guess, a ton of hype. Or there's still hesitation out there amongst rankers, amongst people in
Well,
leagues. So yeah,
like I'm looking like Dallas Wilson's ahead of him. Why? Like what? We talked about Dallas Wilson last week. I get there was excitement, there was reasons to be excited about him, but why? Like why are we doing that? Latsier Brooks, a dedicated slot receiver that we basically said is probably going to be the wide receiver 3 on his own team this year. Like why are we putting him ahead of Amarian Miller? Jalen Lott has proven absolutely nothing, and I don't even necessarily love Oregon as a landing spot for receivers. So why are we putting that player over Amarian Miller? I'm feeling better about that call. I was kind of like meh about it, but I'm like I think it's actually a good call. Amarian Miller needs to be higher for people.
yeah, no, I think that is very fair. I am also a fan, so I think we did it here. Came up with some
I
good
think we
names.
did. We didn't really talk to Andy much, so we didn't get a chance to get like a list from him or anything. We can obviously discuss it next week when he's back, or assuming he'll be back next week. We can see if he has any names that we completely missed or anything like that. But it seems like he's probably too interested in finding all these transfers and everything else for C2C purposes than worrying about who's overrated in Devy.
Right, right. And it would be super fun to talk about draft strategy too. So maybe at a future date we can actually get into that and pick Andy's brain about some of these guys, how he's finding them, why he's drafting them, all those types of things, and even my strategy too. I mean, I went pretty freshman heavy, so it's kind of interesting. Depending on your build of your team, that can be more of a strategy that I'll lead into because that's not consensus or that's not what I'll do all the time. Like I do shift a little bit of how heavy I am with the freshmen. Like the first draft I did this offseason was not freshman heavy at all. There's definitely a couple of guys that were freshmen that I drafted, but this one was more because I just needed that injection of youth for years to come. And I was already pretty solid there at many starting positions. So I felt as though, yeah, bolster with some freshmen more so. So strategy talk, hey, I always love it. And it seems as though a lot of other people out there do like it as well.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to get into some of these supplementals, the actual supplementals, because I fear that people rely too much on these C2C mocks and things. And like, don't get me wrong, any information you can get is great in C2C and everything. But I remember when I first started, I had no idea what I was doing getting into a C2C draft. So what did I do? I went and found Campus to Canton ADP, and I said, all right, I'm going to follow this ADP. And I'm going and I'm like, all right, well, this guy's not up until uh, pick 200 in the ADP, so I don't need to worry about. Oh no, he just went in the third round. Like, and all right, well, I can take this guy now, and then I take this guy, and people go, you could have gotten him in the 20th round. Why are you taking him now? But his ADP, and I found out pretty quickly like. C2C ADP just does not work, especially when you're talking about mocks. A lot of time you're dealing with someone who's trying something, and you hear a lot of people, a lot of podcasters, a lot of content creators, they say, oh well, really wanted this player, but I wanted to see how far he would drop, so I didn't draft him. Okay, well, now he drops in the ADP where normally you're going to take him 2 rounds earlier because he's your guy and stuff like that. So unfortunately it's not something you can truly go off of, and it's so much worse than trying to go off a dynasty ADP or even Devy ADP and things like that. So I wouldn't get too crazy with these mocks, but when we talk about these real drafts, like yes, of course, one person can skew things, but you're still talking about real drafts that people spent money on, or are researching for and doing things like that. So I tend to appreciate that kind of information more. So I definitely want to get into that kind of talks here pretty soon. I have yet to do a supplemental. So I need to get into those talks and figure out who I'm going to be drafting and all that kind of stuff here pretty soon, because I think we're going to be starting up Devy U here in the next couple of weeks.
Hey, I love to hear that.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. It's been a lot of fun over the hour mark as usual. But we appreciate you guys listening. I guess like a little mini series. We had the overrated players last week, the underrated players this week. We will be back in your ears as soon as possible. In fact, it'll be next Tuesday. But we don't know exactly what we're going to be talking about yet. But I promise you it'll be something good. And I promise you, we will be back in your ears next week. But until then, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.
Okay. Think we're good, huh?
Hold on.